I think that sometimes Rotten Tomatoes takes the joy out of the television watching experience. In the age of overproliferation of media, it sometimes can be a comforting thing to seek out, you know, validation that something is well received or that something is critically acclaimed. But as much discourse has been happening online the past few years, the aggregate reviewers of people on this site and on many sites are mostly straight white men, as most of the people who run these blogs and who have had institutionalized power at these culture magazines have for, decades and decades. Obviously, this is changing and becoming more progressive over time, but it is hard to ignore that whenever there is diversity and inclusion and any sort of expansion or adaptation of work that was in its origin primarily perceived in the context of white people, there is this review bombing that happens where everyone's like, it's a terrible adaptation. It's such a waste of your time. One might think back to The Rings of Power, which recently faced similar scrutiny. I feel I have two thoughts here. One, that you should be allowed to enjoy things without having to let a site like Rotten Tomatoes make you feel like shit about liking something. Like, for example, I watched this show independent of reading any reviews, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really interesting story. I really liked the characters. I liked the plot, the pacing. I felt really taken away on the sort of adventure. That being said, I haven't read all of the books by the author, so I'm not comparing this like I would say to a text that I had pored over and that was like a childhood favorite. And I can understand the impulse when you're like a super fan of something to be like, oh, they didn't do this, or oh, they got this wrong. And I don't know that because I'm coming into it as a complete new person. So to me, it was just an enjoyable, interesting fantasy show. That being said, sometimes it feels like fandoms can be quite toxic and that they don't want they don't want expansions to succeed. The way that Lord of the Rings fans reacted to Rings of Power, it felt like they wanted that show to fail, which is strange to me because apart from the racist implications of not liking a diverse adaptation of one of your fantasy favorite classics, I really just reject this idea of clinging to an artistic purity lens and not rooting for the franchises or the actors or the storytellers who are trying to breathe life into these beloved works, not rooting for them to succeed. And I also think, in a closing thought, you should just like whatever you like. Don't if people hate on something, if you like it, then like it. I loved Rings of Power. I loved The Witcher Blood Origin. And I'm not going to let a terrible review score on Rotten Tomato from a bunch of angry white dudes convince me otherwise.